There is a moment when a situation stops being difficult and becomes impossible. Not complicated, not hard, impossible. It's the moment when the doctor lowers his voice, when the bank closes the last door, when the person you loved doesn't come back, when your body stops responding, when everything you could do, you already did, and it wasn't enough. And in that moment, there is a question that settles in your chest in a way that has no easy answer. Where is God when everything reaches its limit? The Bible doesn't avoid that question. It answers it with 3 stories that have something in common that almost no one mentions when they teach them. In all 3, God didn't arrive before the limit. He arrived after, not when there were still human options on the table. He arrived when there were none left, and what he did in that moment wasn't solve the problem. It was do something the problem itself couldn't anticipate. Today we're going to walk through those 3 stories with the attention they deserve, not as generic inspirational accounts, but as concrete cases of what ancient Jewish and Christian theology called the theology of the 11th hour. The idea that God often waits until the last moment, not because he forgot, but because the miracle he has prepared doesn't fit in an earlier moment. Before we continue, a direct question. Are you in that moment right now? Do you feel like you've exhausted every option, and what you're waiting for still hasn't come? Tell us in the comments. And if this kind of content gives you something, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The first story is Lazarus, and to truly understand it you have to read it in the exact order the text tells it. John 11:1, Lazarus is sick. His family sends word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. The message doesn't ask anything explicitly, but the implication is clear. Come now, while there's still time. And then something happens that the text records with a precision that is unsettling the first time you read it. John 11:6. When Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Not because he didn't know, not because he couldn't. The text itself says Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, John 11:5, and yet he waited. He waited until Lazarus died. And when he finally decided to go, his disciples told him it was dangerous to return to Judea. Jesus answered with something that, in the context of what he was about to do, carries a specific weight. Lazarus has died. And for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. John 11:14 and 15. He was glad, not about his friend's death, but about not having arrived earlier. Because if he had arrived earlier, what would have happened would have been a healing. And Jesus didn't go to Bethany to heal a sick man. He went to demonstrate something that a healing couldn't demonstrate. When Jesus arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. That detail is not accidental. In the Jewish tradition of the time, it was believed that the soul remained near the body for 3 days after death, hoping to be reunited with it. On the 4th day, the soul departed definitively because the body had begun to decompose beyond any possible return. 4 days wasn't simply dead. It was dead with no way back, according to every standard of the time. Martha goes out to meet Jesus and says something she has been carrying for 4 days. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. John 11:21. It's not an accusation. It's the most honest pain that exists, that of the person who believed, who waited, and who watched death arrive anyway. Jesus doesn't correct her. He doesn't explain why he waited. He says, your brother will rise again. John 11:23. And when he arrives at the tomb, he asks them to remove the stone. And Martha, always practical, always honest, says what anyone would say, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. John 11:39. There will be an odor. It is the most human statement in the entire chapter. It is the boundary between what faith can hold and what the senses confirm as final. And Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. John 11:41. And he called Lazarus, and Lazarus came out. He didn't come out healed from an illness. He came out of death, because Jesus didn't arrive to do what everyone expected him to come and do. He arrived to do something that could only happen after every other possibility had closed. The second story begins with a number, 12 years, not 12 days, not 12 weeks. 12 years of a hemorrhage that the text of Mark 5:25-34 describes with a narrative economy that doesn't hide what those years meant. 12 years of a condition that under Jewish law made her ritually unclean. 12 years in which she couldn't touch anyone without that person becoming unclean as well. 12 years of social exclusion that went far beyond the physical. She was excluded from the temple, from the community, from common life with other people. The text adds something more. She had spent everything she had on doctors who not only hadn't helped her, but had made her condition worse. Mark 5:26. 12 years. No money. No medical options. No community. No body that responded. That is the starting point of the story, not the beginning of the problem, the moment when the problem had already exhausted everything, and in that state, she heard about Jesus. She didn't go to ask him for help directly. She didn't request an audience. She didn't identify herself. The text says she thought, if I just touch his garment, I will be made well. Mark 5:28, just the edge, just the hem of the cloth. Not his hand, not his face, not his direct attention, just brushing what others touched without thinking. And she did it, and the hemorrhage stopped. But then something happens that turns this story into more than a healing. Jesus stops in the middle of a crowd, pressing in on him from all sides, and asks, "Who touched me?" Luke 8:45. His disciples answer what anyone would answer. "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus says someone touched him differently. That power had gone out from him, and he waited. And the woman, trembling, knowing what she had done and what that meant under the law, came forward, and she told him everything in front of everyone. And Jesus said something to her that, in the context of 12 years of invisibility, carries a specific weight. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Mark 5:34. He called her daughter. To a woman who had been untouchable for 12 years, who had arrived at the end of every resource she had, who had approached without even daring to ask out loud, Jesus stopped. He identified her. He called her by a name of belonging. For God, the person who reaches the limit of their strength and still extends their hand is not a number in a crowd. They are the only stopping point. The third story has no individual protagonist. It has an entire people. Exodus 14. The people of Israel have just left Egypt. They have just witnessed the plagues. They have just crossed the boundary between slavery and freedom. And now they are trapped. Ahead, the Red Sea. Behind, Pharaoh's army with its war chariots closing in. The text doesn't soften the panic. Exodus 14:10-12. When the people saw the army approaching, they were terrified and cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" They prefer slavery to death. It is the most honest declaration of what fear does to memory. When the danger is great enough, even a terrible past starts to seem better than an impossible present. Moses says, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord." Exodus 14:13. And God says to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to move forward." Exodus 14:15. He didn't remove the army from behind. He didn't transport them to the other side. He didn't rescue them from the situation. He told them to advance toward the sea. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea divided. And the Israelites went into the middle of the sea on dry ground, with the waters as a wall on their right hand and on their left. Exodus 14:21-22. God didn't solve the problem before it arrived. He let it reach the point where any human way out was literally impossible. And then he opened a path in the place where there was no path. He didn't change the problem. He created the way out inside the problem. If these 3 stories are saying something to you, if you feel like you're in your 4th day, or that you've been waiting 12 years, or that you have the sea ahead and the army behind, this is a good moment to like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet. And tell us in the comments which of these 3 stories spoke to you most directly today. All 3 stories have something in common that goes beyond being miracles. In all 3, the miracle was greater because it came after the limit. If Jesus had arrived before Lazarus died, he would have healed a sick man, beautiful, but he would not have answered the deepest question we ask: what happens when it's already too late? With Lazarus, the answer was recorded forever. Too late does not exist in God's vocabulary. If the woman with the hemorrhage had been healed in the 1st year, it would have been a private relief. But arriving at year 12, with no money and no options, and being stopped and named in public by Jesus, her story stopped being just her story and became the testimony that God does not lose sight of the person who reaches the end of their strength. If the sea had divided before the army was close, the people might have thought crossing the sea was possible for natural reasons. But with the army behind and the sea ahead, what happened had no other possible explanation. God's delay is not a sign of abandonment. In all 3 stories, the delay was the signature of a miracle that needed that level of impossibility to be what it was. That doesn't make the 4th day of waiting easier. It doesn't make year 12 more bearable. It doesn't take away the fear when the army approaches and the sea isn't moving. But it does change the question we ask while we wait. The question stops being "Where is God?" and becomes, for what level of impossibility is he preparing what comes next? If you're in one of those places right now, tell us in the comments. We read every one. And if someone else is going through the same thing, your story might be exactly what changes their day. Leave us your like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.